Okay, everybody. I'm excited. I've got a returning guest on the podcast, and in a little blurb I have for this chat that we're going to do, I talked about how it's one of the most memorable chats that I've had on the podcast out of almost the nearly 70 that I've done episodes. So I hope that means something to you guys of how much I enjoyed that first chat talking about the history and all that. But for those that don't know who I'm talking with right now, this is David and Adam of Lord Helmet, very dynamic duo that make very big records as a two-piece. That you would think listening is like a 4 or 5 piece band, but it's not. But very glad to have you guys back on. Um, I know how the morning's been going so far with the both of you, but hopefully it's been good, all things considered.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, good, good.
Fairly normal.
Yeah. Well, I think I just want to get right into it, man. Let's open up the can or whatever, however I want to phrase that on the new record, Take Evasive Action, like 3+ years of production and writing and all that for this album. I've heard it. I'm in love with it. I feel like it's probably of the three, my favorite of the three records, and I love the one before it, man. Get Back to the Ship and the first one as well, but this one just it's special to me. So let's talk about it. Wherever you want to start with the story with this record and how it started, I will leave up to either one of you. So I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Trying to remember how I remember it started. It was maybe a month after the second album came out, and I was up visiting my in-laws in Seattle, and I remember having a chat with Adam on the phone where we were like, I don't know if we could like top that, right? And you've said, Adam, I think you've said similar things since, where like after that last one, you weren't sure you could quite top what you did. But we thought, well, let's just kind of see how it goes. And I think, we had a couple of ideas that ended up in Beyond the Fire. That main riff, that thing, which is kind of like reggae prog. And but I had that kicking around for a while, many years. In fact, I tried introducing that into a previous band, and it didn't really go anywhere. Other than that, we didn't have much. So I think the first thing that I did was I just started recording little riffs into my phone, and I would like send those to Adam. And then one riff that ended up in Things Will Fall Apart that was the first song that kind of emerged.
Okay.
Which is interesting when I think about it now, because like that's like probably the least proggy song on the record.
It's a little more straightforward hard rock. Kind of,
but there's that underlying riff that like kind of weird in relation to the straightness of like what the bass and the drums are doing. So, it's still kind of unusual, but for us a little bit more straight ahead. But that kind of emerged first. And I think that, I don't know, Adam, if you can remember how this went, but I think when you heard that, you were like, okay, we've got a good song here, and we could probably do this again.
Yeah. I think that, some of the demos that were coming in, because if you listen to the raw sketches of where we start on stuff versus where they end, they're drastically different. But having a song there is always like, all right, we can build off a song and then put tricks around it, and make it cool, and that's kind of what Dave was saying is some of those early demos. So I was like, well, the songwriting's, I hear songs here that are good, so it's just a matter of, babying those thoughts. Sometimes some artists that I've worked with, they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They just want it to be done. And if it's not done, they don't want to work on it. Or if it's not at the level where they want it at. Where me and Dave, I think why we work so well together is we just keep polishing that sucker until it's finally where it needs to be. And if you had to hear how many nitpicks we did to every single song for over 3-4 years, it's stupid. Like we just, every little part, like, oh, change that, until it gets where it is. But the Things Will Fall Apart, I'd say, out of the record, is the one that got tampered with the least, I think.
Yeah,
like the
true.
only thing that really got tampered with is like the middle 8 section
Mm-hmm.
and how we kind of did that. And, you know, and Dave went back and forth on some vocal ideas, but the main verse chorus was there. And that's definitely what he's saying. When I heard that, I was like, that's there. That's a song that doesn't even need to be screwed with, you know, where like Beyond the Fire. Yeah. That reggae riff, you know, we almost used that on Get Back to the Ship.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't get around to it. We were like, we just didn't get around to it. And actually the oldest thing on this record is Butcher in Your Brain. That was back from like 2017 or so when we first started getting together. When I built a studio, and I was like, I need bass lines to try some drum tones out with. And Dave sent me just a bunch of his bass jams to a metronome, you know, and that's how Get Back to the Ship riffs. Half that record was made that way. And I chopped up just one of his just crazy jams, and that song is the chop up, you know, and we just
That's
never
right.
used it. We had a bass and drum version of that in 2017 that's not that much different bass and drum wise from what you're listening to now. The big change was the guitars and the vocals over 7 years or whatever, 10, you know. They've definitely added it didn't make the other parts of the didn't make the other records because we just weren't content on what was going on with guitar and vocals. And then he stepped up on this record and just killed that song. We're like, oh dang, right, that's going on this record.
Well,
so but that's the oldest piece we have.
I want to add. Go ahead. Or if you want to go, or I could go.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to make a comment about Butcher in Your Brain. If you remember in the review that I posted up, I described it as like a Dream Theater prog punk kind of song. But I also feel like it's a little bit rushy in nature too. Mm-hmm. Like it brings Rush to mind a bit too. It's the shortest track on the record as well, but it also sounds still like really realized though. It sounds finished. And it's almost like an interlude of sorts.
Yeah.
You know, between the first half and then the back half of the record.
Yeah.
And then Things Will Fall Apart. I also want to comment about like that kind of that just anchors in my head. Like keeps repeating in my head from that, like is one of the most in the song or the record. Some of my favorite riffage on the record. Like it just hangs in there and it just doesn't leave.
That's cool. It's interesting because like a lot of times what happens is like we'll get a sketch and you know it takes years. Like, you know, I mean, like Things Fall Apart. I mean, I wrote the verse and the chorus in 2020, early 2022. So we've had 3 years or whatever it's been of that hanging around. And in the interim, I kind of like remade my studio and I got a bunch of new plugins and some new pedals and, you know, all sorts of stuff. And so I was getting much better guitar tones. And we started then, you know, writing all kinds of other stuff and things started getting, you know, pretty heavy, probably heavier than we've been in the past. And then, you know, I went back because I wanted to look at Things Will Fall Apart and make sure that it was sonically like sitting right with everything else that we had. And I re-recorded all the guitars and it just wasn't like, it wasn't the same. It was like, it just wasn't hitting the same way. So I ended up using pretty much the demo version of the guitars with just a couple of exceptions. The demo is pretty guitar wise and bass wise too, is pretty much like what made the final version. And it's funny how that works. Like sometimes, you know, you write something and then things evolve and you end up changing sounds and the way you perform it or whatever. But in the case of that song, it was like, it just kind of like, I don't know, something happened like during that first couple of takes where we captured it. And the same thing goes for the drums, because that was the first drum piece that you put together too. We kind of just had that song more or less, as you said, kind of done for that song's basically been done for 3 years.
Yeah, it sat on the back burner knowing it was going to make the record, but we were too busy nitpicking all the other ones. Like I said, that's the one that changed the least. You know?
Yeah.
What would you say about When the Land Meets the Sea? Because that song is bonkers, man. Like it just, I was saying to David when he sent me the file for the record that I feel like it's probably the heaviest song Lord Helmet has put out, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's one of the longest too. And I'm just like, man, they come out the gate with this record and just hit you like a landslide or something with a song that just crushes.
Yeah.
You know, it's how did you get that song to be what it is on the record? Because that's a lot of music in that song.
I can comment for a second on there.
Yeah.
So Dave threw down several of the riffs, you know, that are kind of like thematic riffs that are just big and fat and heavy. And they're just, he's like, what do you think of these riffs? You know, that's like all it kind of was. And I was like, and he does that a lot, just throw stuff. And I'm like, I really think we need to hang on to these riffs. Like I could see doing some crazy stuff with that, you know? And then as he's waiting for me to do something to it, because I was busy and lagging, he got impatient and he just starts like morphing riffs together and like making this masterpiece of stuff. And so even though I had all these visions of what I could do to it, he just kind of took charge and started just making tons of rad riffs. And then the biggest change for the song, other than, you know, putting real drums to it, was the verses used to be mellow with an organ. And it was the same vocal line, but they were like, it almost had like the Who style or something going on, where it was like, you know, this mellow thing. And I was like, can we do that same thing, but, you know, just do, you know, like
the 16th note, that
do the 16 notes, like do like Fugazi style, or, you know, and make it like up tempo. And that's, I tried to, so let's do Fugazi with production, you know, on the verse. And that's kind of
wow.
Yeah, the verse used to be, it was like, I still have the demo of it where it was like, I just kind of played, it was like a, you know, but like, you know, sort of a little bit, it had a little bit of a prog flair, but it was very kind of single note and a little thin, and yeah, a little bit of organ. And then there's that vocal. And yeah, absolutely. Adam stepped in and was like, what if we got rid of that and just made it really driving, which of course would never have occurred to me. But then we tried it and it was like, oh, this is huge. And then I thought, okay, well, I added that little, because I think that was sort of, when you mentioned Fugazi, I was thinking, what's the first song on that?
Yeah, I was like, Dave, go listen to In on the Kill Takers first record, or the first song on the record, and the intro has these little you know. And we tried to like take that influence and bring that into what we're doing, you know. So there's one of our little stolen secrets there.
But I think ultimately it was, you know, I had a 5-minute demo of 5 or 6 different riffs. The verse riff, the one that's like that, that was the first riff that I came up with for that. And then there were a couple of other things like the part. Anyway, so then we started gluing that stuff together. What came, I think the last thing that really came into it was the you know, the big that whole thing. And I don't know. I mean, I think it, you know, over the course of like a couple of months, once we really got into it, it just started taking shape. And I remember when we had more or less like an 7.5-8 minute version of it. And I remember we were just like, this is maybe like, this might be the best thing that we've done.
It's pretty freaking good.
I kind of see it as like, that's our high watermark, that song, kind of like our, whatever, the crown jewel of our.
And I guess you're not supposed to normally put like a 10-minute song as your first track, but we were like, well, not too many people may ever listen to us, so maybe we should put that on the album first, so at least they hear that, you know.
Yeah.
And what a how would I say it? They really be being rude to themselves by not listening to that full track, because they're missing some really grand moments on the record in that first track itself. Like there's just so many sections in that song that I could comment about where I'm just sitting there in my mind just going
That's great.
You know, they would be missing that. And it's something I hate about the generations that are coming up is their attention spans and patience for things to just fully just take their, you know, final form or whatever you'd say is so limited anymore. They want like a 2.5 minute song or like an hour and 20-minute movie or whatever, 300-page book or something, you know, or even less than that. And I'm just like, I'm so glad that I'm part of a generation where there's still a lot of that. You still want the physical like album in your hand.
Yeah.
You still want to just listen, let a song do its runtime, or an album have its runtime, you know, because a lot of bands are going to that single release format, like they single every other month or something, or like an EP every 6 months or something. You know, that's fine, you know, and it's working for a lot of them. But man, that first song, like I just mentioned, they're really missing out if they don't listen to the whole thing. It's so grand and so epic, and just some of the finest Lord Helmet songwriting in general. So
right on. Thank you. We both, I'm sure, appreciate that very much. It's
yeah,
it means a lot. And we went back and forth about where to put it, and you know, maybe it should be the last thing, and then ultimately it was like, no, let's just you know, let's just
pack it on the front.
Let's just start with that, you know, because it's like, you know, it's been a few years, and you know, I think the stuff that people tended to respond, like if you look at like, you know, whatever our Spotify stats, Apple Music stats, the stuff that gets the most attention is the proggy stuff. So, well, I thought, you know, this is certainly the proggiest thing on the record. So yeah, it just kind of made sense to lead with it. It's very much like an identity. This is kind of what we're about. If you wanted to know what we're about, I think in one song,
it's a good representation. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you want to comment on about that song for Adam or you, Dave, before I move on to the next one I wanted to touch on? Fun little facts about it or anything like that, like interesting moments?
The only fun fact is in that middle 8 section, you know, he's got like he's got some weird guitar line in there. And I was like, what are you playing there? And he had to like break it down. He called me over the phone and it was like, it's like a samba type of thing, you know, and he literally like sang it. I'm like, can you just sing it to me? Like, I'm hearing so much distortion and stuff. I don't know where to grab, like where to aim this. And when he did that little, I was like, oh, okay, just play a samba beat to it. And like, and that's what I did when I actually, after I, you know, get done jerking a little riff, you know, some licks on it, then I'm like, all right, I'll just slap into this samba type of beat there. But it's funny that came from something that's just, you know, you'd be sitting on an island somewhere or something. Right?
It is, but that's what's so cool about you guys. You write in a way that's not exactly conventional as far as where you might draw an idea.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that works to your benefit.
I think so. I mean, it's funny because like, yeah, that part of When the Land Meets the Sea, the guitar is basically, that's it. It's like, dun, 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 dun. Like that's the rhythm, right? It's very kind of, you know, whatever. It's got that kind of samba feel. And it's like, you know, like with Beyond the Fire, it's basically a reggae, you know, that the form of the bass line, do, 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 like that. Like how many reggae songs have that as their foundation? And so the idea of taking those little rhythmic notes, samba, reggae, whatever, and then turning it into this big, heavy prog thing, I think that's one of the ways in which this record is, in my mind anyway, shows a real kind of evolution in songwriting.
Absolutely.
Is taking in. It's one thing to be like, oh, let's you know, let's take Fugazi and like meld that with Pink Floyd or whatever. Like that's cool. But it's another thing to be like, okay, let's do that. And let's like take from this tradition, like this musical tradition, like, you know, reggae, and from this musical tradition, like samba, and bring those into it too. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of what we accomplished on that one for sure.
Absolutely need to be. And please, people, please, if you get to this part of the interview, I beg you, do not let your thoughts or attention wander or wane it like the 4.5 minute song of When the Land Meets the Sea, because you're going to kick your own ass for not finishing that song, because the way that song finishes out and parts of like, I'd say there's more than one bridge of the song in my opinion, but you're missing some brilliant moments of this record in that first track. So please listen to the whole thing, okay? Please. The next one I want to touch on is I call it in a way, and I might be wrong, but what you're saying now, it hit me like sort of like a ballad of the record. It's a bit of a softer touch on that song, but at the same time. So, are you familiar with the Filter song "Cancer"?
Yeah, I think I listened to it because my buddy was listening to that song and he brought up Filter, and we were listening to some old Filter albums recently. I'm not good with song titles. I forget the name of our own songs. Ask Dave. I'm like, what's that song called?
Right.
You know, like for a minute I couldn't remember Butcher in Your Brain. I was like, well, in this interview, I was like, damn, do I not know the name of my own song here? You know, because we used to call it Chrome Dome. So I was
Chrome Dome.
Yeah. When it was an instrumental for years, we called it Chrome Dome.
Yes,
that's pretty funny. But I bring up Filter because the drum tone and the bass lines, they really remind me a bit of how Cancer plays out by Filter. It's not that it's exactly the same, but the atmosphere and the mood of it kind of lines up in ways, and it's a good thing, you know. Filter, I feel like, don't get their due credit as songwriters a lot of the time. You know, there's some pretty successful band, not to say they aren't, but that song, what you're saying now though, like those verses, they kind of have like a dark, kind of crawling atmosphere or pace to it. And I said it in the review, I believe I did, and I know I've said it to Dave. It's my favorite song on the record, and I'm not saying that it's like above the other songs as far as like being the best song on the record, because I'm sure you'd argue that, oh well, Where the Land Meets the Sea, I'd say is the best song on the record, and probably it is. But my favorite though is what I call the ballad of the record, and it just, the guitar solo in that song just like melts into you, and it's just so well placed and well executed in the track. Just the full track itself, man. I want to hear about. And what are we? Okay, so 10:05. Yeah. Can we touch on the track a bit though? Just like how it's conceptualized.
Two things. That the main riff, that was a riff that I just recorded on my phone, and I think I sent that to Adam, and he thought that was cool. And then the choruses came along, and there's the funny thing about that song, no one would ever notice this if I didn't bring it up, but if you listen to the choruses, there's a melody that the guitars and the keys are doubling up on, and it's a note to John Lennon's Mind Games. If you know that song, listen to John Lennon Mind Games, and there's this string part, and I kind of noted to that because that's kind of what the song is about, right? It's sort of about, mind games, people, sort of, you could think of it as like a relationship where, you sort of, you connect with someone and you think they're saying one thing and it turns out they're saying something else. Or you think about it in terms of politics, or any time there's a kind of, you find yourself following whether a person or a group or whatever, and then you kind of have a realization that what you thought you saw or what you thought you heard is something entirely different than what's really
going on. It's different.
And that's, so I thought it would be cool to like make a note of that John Lennon song in the melody. So it's interesting that like the Filter thing is coming through, that influence. And here again, it's like, you take a kind of, somewhat obscure John Lennon tune and a note from that, and then like just a nod to it, and then that kind of the Filter groove, bring that together. And because the lyric emerged pretty early on with that song. So this idea of what it was about was always kind of informing the performances, I think. So there, like that solo is very kind of, there's a degree of like longing, or even
absolutely
of some sort of emotional distress, in that solo. So yeah, I mean, I think I know that. And then the only one, I know I'm talking a lot, but the only other thing is that the synth that ba-ba-bow.
Mhm.
I really wanted to tap into my inner Brian Eno. And that's as close as that I think I'll ever get. Is sort of reminiscent of what he was doing back in the day, just making weird synth sounds. And so yeah, it's sort of like Filter meets John Lennon meets Brian Eno in my mind, with that kind of message about kind of again, not exactly being taken in, but having a realization that what you thought you heard or what you thought you were a part of is in fact not the case at all.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it with the words, the instrumentation. I mean, that's kind of exactly what I took away with it. And I feel like I phrased it sort of like that when I was describing it in the review, of being sort of like breaking away from something when you realize something about it, either a person, situation, or whatever, and seeing it for what it is. Like what was being said or what was being like an action or whatever versus actual thing. The contrast is just so obvious.
Yeah.
And clear at that point. So, I mean, it's a brilliant song, man. I honestly would listen to that. I listened to it every day, every morning before I started in for my job. Is I would go into the file and I'd open that track and I just sit there in my car and just listen to it and just take it in. I'm just like, this is such an impressive display of songwriting that a lot of bands today that are blowing up, there's not really an attention on songwriting. It's more about how similar it is to what else is popular. And you mentioned in a comment on the review when you had reshared it of we're the greatest unknown band that nobody knows about. I say that's probably a strength of Lord Helmet, that well, maybe people need to pay attention because they're going to learn something about songwriting if they listen to Lord Helmet. There's not really an interest about being this stadium band or an arena band. It's the sake of the music and just making music is what it's about for Lord Helmet. So reference Lord Helmet bands if you watch this for songwriting from that aspect alone.
That's
and you're going to learn something.
I know, Adam, you always had a feeling about that song, even when I was sort of like,
oh yeah. Well, that song from the early demos, the bass and drum verse was always there. And I remember, and I'm not saying, Dave, that you were influenced by this, but I'm before you said that, when we were kind of throwing songs at each other, of like, hey, maybe we could be influenced by this type of a vibe.
Yeah.
I threw Dave a band called OK Go, and there's a song called WTF, and it's got a really groovy type of feel, like you're like right. really groovy.
I do remember that. Yeah, I think that the riff, the verse riff, is probably influenced by that.
It might have been, and so there's
not
that there where I kind of have a go feel in there. And then the second verse, the drum beat, I really tried to mimic as much as I could Pass the Mic by the Beastie Boys. Like I was trying to really just give, and they have the overproduction with the snare being really big and loud and reverby and fat, where some people I know are going to think, right, that snare's just big, a little too big. And it's like, yeah, you could say that. But, where I'm coming from with it came from production that was overproduced like that, like Beastie Boys, And so that's kind of the vibe I was trying to go for. And lyrically, it's funny because when you guys talk about what it means to you, a different listener can mean something totally different. Like for me, I don't think about what you guys say it's about, whatever. Like for me, the song to me is about, I caught you talking trash and I remember everything you said. And now what are you going to say? What are you saying now?
What do you say now?
Yeah, like I held down to every single word. I heard that, and I got you,
Yeah.
So that's, to me, it's about catching the trash talk, off radar, but that song really, the biggest change from the demo was the chorus melody was there, but just the way we morphed it. I remember we were kind of like, I was fighting for like more width and space, like the original. Sometimes Dave will send me programmed drums to it and they keep it stuck in a certain groove, and so I'm like, nah, it needs like just a simple John Bonham Rage Against the Machine kind of throw to it in that chorus to make it swing harder, And so I'd throw him like a beat like that, and then he'd go, okay, well, now that I have that, I can get all like Pink Floyd on it and make it wide.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of back and forth trade-off, which is the beauty of having the studios at the house, where we can go, okay, what would this be like if you had to play to this beat, instead of that, and it forces each other to change position on it, and then the middle eight came as a result of everything else. Once we found where we were at, it was like, right, it got crazy in there, so
Yeah.
But I might argue it might be my favorite song on the record too, in a sense. There's something to it. So
No, right on. Guess we should push.
Yeah. Maybe another single for it.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do. Maybe on Tuesday when it's out properly.
Yeah.
We can.
To start wrapping this up though, like what more would you guys like to say about the record to entice people more about it and kind of get them prepared for what they're about to hear?
Well, I mean, I think certainly if you like what we've done in the past, you're going to like this, right? I mean, it's sort of taking the best of what we did on the first and second record, the best of that, and figuring out how to shape all of that stuff into. I think we found ourselves. I think we figured out what we are with this record, right? This is like, okay, we understand like the stuff that we do really well, where the collaboration really peaks. Let's just lean into that, right? So it's like in the past, it might have been like, if you listen to the first record, you've got songs, that are like 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes, and then you've got one or two prog epics. And then the second record is more like, it's more proggy, but it's also a little looser and like a little jammier. And so this one, I think, just tries to harness all of that stuff and just like, what if we brought all of that into pretty much all of our songs, right? And so I think it's just it's really an example of us kind of figuring out who we are and I guess it's just a more mature kind of record overall in my mind. Not in a bad way, like not in a way where it's like,
no, right, yeah,
it's too sort of adult contemporary or whatever, but it's just more of it sort of reflects the fact that we kind of have arrived at an understanding of what it is we're trying to do.
And what about for you, Adam?
Yeah, I agree with all that. It's on the maturity part. I think a lot of it is the width of the music. It's just wider than a lot of our previous stuff. The vocals and guitar took a big step up. So compared to our last records, I think Dave took more time to really perfect the guitar tones and fool with different sounds. I mean, Dave, for me, has always been a bass player that has been one of my favorite bass players out of anybody in the world. Like I'm like, dude, you're the sickest bass player you've ever met, me. And and through the Lord Helmet process, he just said, well, I'm going to do this instrument and that instrument and sing. And, he's become everything. He does everything. So, but I really think he stepped up his game hard on vocal and guitar. And that makes a big difference. And I think that for me, drumming wise and morphing into what's going on, like, I feel like I just really wanted it to be where if it was ever played live, it would just, shake a stage hard,
It will.
I'm
that
not
stage is going to need reinforced.
I'm not a typical prog drummer. I wouldn't consider myself a prog drummer. Prog drummers that are like, they practice all the time and they're really fast. I'm not that guy, so I like bands that are more, like Fugazi or Zeppelin or even Helmet, speaking of Lord Helmet, that are just big swingy throwers, and so for me, I really I didn't practice hardly anything for this. I would just listen to the stuff a million times in my head and create it in my head. And then I'd go in and just hit the drums really hard. None of this like, oh, let's play mellow in the studio. Like, no, I'm going to play it live. I'm going to play it hard. And when I play live one day, hopefully we will, it'll just thump a stage, none of this like, I don't like the prog bands where it looks like they're pinching a turd to pull off their part, So you know, growing up, I'd listen to some records and be like, oh, I could play that. And then I'd go watch the band play live and be like, well, I can't play it like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Abe Cunningham from the Deftones is a great example of that, you
Dude,
know.
he is brilliant. Yes, for sure.
You know, I'd back in the early mid 90s, you know, I'd listen to Adrenaline and be like, oh, I could do that. And then, you know, we ended up, my other band Sloth used to tour on the Warped Tour with them, and no, I couldn't do it like he did it. Like he just, the Round the Fur tour, I was on that tour for a while and on the Warped Tour, and just they'd smash the stage every day. So I always had that kind of, you know, back of my head going, all right, if you're gonna do it proper, you know, and you know, that band always did it proper live anyways, you know. So
Yeah.
Well,
hopefully we'll be able to do some live stuff. I think we've been talking about it, and you know, the questions have just been how to go about doing it. But I'm at the point where I'm tired of talking about it and just kind of want to do it. So I think, you know, we'll probably start putting our heads around that, or trying to get our arms around that idea logistically. I do have, you know, I have access to some great musicians at the music school that's I teach and at here in Los Angeles, and I have, you know, there are a lot of students going around who are really great instrumentalists, and I think it would be I think it wouldn't be that hard to find if we just, you know, if we found two people who could, you know, do a bit of guitar and even some bass and some keys, and who could sing. And then we just kind of figure out who's going to do what on what song. You know, it's doable. And then Adam can fly out and we'll do some shows.
Yeah. Well, if you get that ever figured out and it's logistically and it makes sense and it's feasible, you know, I'm in Oregon. I'm just a state over for Dave at least. If an Oregon show would be possible on like a really short run,
yeah,
I will be there 100%. You know, 100%.
You're all crazy. All our shows are going to be in Tennessee. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
So what you're saying, Dave is going to fly to Tennessee, and you're going to stay at home base area.
Yeah, I mean, I can't stick this thing in the mail. You know? Like,
right.
Be a pain to bring that out to LA.
Well, I mean, so yeah, I mean,
yeah. So we'll see if we can make that happen. And if we can finally make that happen, you know, we'll definitely keep you in the loop.
That please do. And just to get you guys on your way, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. And just for my final closing notes, just say to the viewers that watch this, if they haven't been paying attention to the socials, this Tuesday that's coming up, the 27th, is the full release for Take Evasive Action. And if you were paying attention, the 20th was a soft release on the Bandcamp. And I think that they can still access that soft release right now.
Yeah.
So you can grab the record now, too.
Yeah.
So get on that. It's a record you do not want to sleep on. I 100% say it. It's a contender for record for the year, for me at least. It is a 5 of 5 release, 10 of 10, whatever you want to say. I'm choking on my own spit there for a second. Getting too excited. So please
don't get too excited.
So please check out this record. Check out the other two records too. This is a band that is brilliant. Two people that I think are phenomenal musicians and songwriters. So please check out the record on Bandcamp now if you don't want to wait for the full release on the 27th. And anything else you guys want to say before I get you on your way?
I mean, just thanks
Yeah.
for your support, and you know, we really appreciate it. You know, the more people like you that we encounter, not only, you know, does it allow us to, you know, present ourselves to more people, but it's really validating to have, you know, to people such as yourself to, you know, to hear that what we're doing is clicking with you. It's, you know, it means a lot.
Yeah.
My pleasure. I'm thankful for the music to exist.
We appreciate it, man. Like we really, a lot of this Lord Helmet stuff is just so I can get in my car and bang my head and go, we did that, you know, like, right. So getting it out to other people is not our specialty, you know? So, you know, we're good at just being friends that like to jam, and it's a hobby to just try to make a piece of art every so often and put it out. So the next step is trying to get people to actually hear that. So thank you for your support on that and your kind words, man.
Yeah, no problem. Meant every bit of it. And I'm going to do my best to keep sharing it around, this interview, the review, the first interview that we did. And I'm going to tag everybody that's following my page. That's like almost 500 people that I could tag at followers and just blast them with it. So I'm going to. And hopefully people actually check it out and find their way to you and say, dude, this kicks ass. So, but
all right, man.
Thanks for coming on.
Very much.
I hope you guys have a wonderful day. We'll be in touch. And for the next one, even just hit me back up and we'll do this again and again. So,
absolutely.
You take it easy, guys.
Take care.
Thanks.
See ya.
I'm good.